Hello everyone, welcome back to the Edgar Allan Poe Birthday Celebration. I hope you enjoyed Berenice. And did you figure out what was the censored part? Well, I'll tell you right now. It was the library scene. That's the part that offended people. They said it was in bad taste. So Poe removed it and we included that censored piece for your enjoyment. So I hope you enjoyed it. But right now, we will be talking about the mysterious Poe toaster. Recently, there's been a number of articles mentioning the Poe toaster, and almost all of them had the wrong information. You would think they would call me up and just to verify the information, so I thought this would be a good time to talk about it, since I'm the one that's been involved with this tradition since 1977. So, here we go. Oh, one more thing. As you watch this, please feel free to make a post. Tell us where you are from. I know last year we had many people from around the world making comments, so if you make a comment, and even if you don't, tell us who you are and where you are from. We would love to see that. So now, the Poe toaster. Since 1976, I've been associated with this site. In 1976, I was a volunteer tour guide of the old Westminster Church and Graveyard. And that was also the year of the Baltimore Bicentennial. And many people that served in the Revolutionary War and War of 1812 are buried in this historic cemetery. So I went to the Pratt Library to do research into the site. And I came across this article published in 1950. I believe it was August. The Sun Papers was interviewing the then pastor of the church, and he was lamenting how difficult it was to raise money to keep this house of worship in shape, and how it was difficult maintaining the historic graveyard. And midway through the article, there was a little paragraph where he mentioned that he thought that the person who leaves the expensive liquor and flowers on the Poe grave is a jokester. So I read that and I thought, well, that's strange. I wonder if it's still going on, or if it was just one of these myths that popped up over the years. So I decided, being young and foolish, that maybe come January 19th, I would spend the night here in my car, parked right outside the Poe monument, which you will see to the left of me. So there I was sitting in my car, and around 3:30 at night, now keep in mind that it wasn't as well lit as it is today. There was no Veterans Hospital across the street, no dormitories, and the street lighting was very dim, not at all like it is now. So I'm sitting in my car in front of the entrance to the Westminster Graveyard, waiting and waiting. So around 3:30 in the morning, I needed to use the men's room, and the nearest one was down the street at the University of Maryland Hospital. So I ran down the street, ran back up, I'm out of breath, I'm sitting in the car, catching my breath, and I glance over at the Poe monument, and in the darkness, I saw something at the base of the monument. So I'm looking at it, and it was too dark to really see what it was. So I got out of my car, and as I'm walking up towards the entrance, I saw what it was. 3 red roses and a half-filled bottle of French cognac. Well, I was just ecstatic. I'm looking around. I wanted to say, hey, look, it's still happening. But there was nobody there. So it was still going on, and I missed the guy by minutes because I needed to use the men's room. So the following year, I decided that I would invite people to stay with me, because what was happening was people were a little bit suspicious. They would say things like, well, Jeff, that's a very interesting story, but you're there all night, you decide to leave for a few minutes, and shazam, the guy shows up with the cognac and roses. So people started looking at me as if I did it. So by inviting other people to stay with me, I could prove that it wasn't me. So sure enough, January 19th of the following year, he showed up again, dressed all in black with a white scarf and black hat. And he had the bottom of his face covered with the scarf. Well, we were just beside ourselves. I mean, this is the first time that we actually were waiting for him and ready for him. And we were hiding in the catacombs beneath what was the Westminster Church at that time, which is, I'm in Westminster Hall now, but in that time period, it was the old Westminster Church. And we were looking through plexiglass windows in the catacombs. And he couldn't see us, but we could see him. So since that time, we've spent the night consistently until 2009, the bicentennial of Poe. And every year in between, we did see the person. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because I never went to the media about this. But somehow the Associated Press heard about this, and they called me up and said, you know, what's going on? And I told them the story, and they published a little article. I forget the exact wording, but it was like, you know, curator at the Poe house is, you know, spending the night in the graveyard looking for the Poe toaster. So that's how the publicity started. So after a while, more and more people started showing up, standing outside the gates. But we never made any attempt to interfere or to hinder this tribute, because the way I see it, it was really none of our business who's doing it. We did capitalize on it over the years, but we never interrupted the tribute. Then in 1990, Life magazine did an article on the Poe toaster. Now, the name Poe toaster was created by the media, and the person who left the tribute would drink a toast to the memory of Poe with the French cognac that he left, so hence the term Poe toaster. So Life magazine did a big article about me and the Poe toaster. It would have been on the front page on the cover of Life magazine, but Jim Henson, the puppeteer, died, and he bumped us off of the cover. So once that hit, we had a lot of people showing up. At one point, we had 100 people standing outside the gates. But the Poe toaster still managed to elude them and place the tribute on the gravesite. Now, he would alternate. Sometimes he would leave the tribute on the monument, like I said, to my left at the entrance. Sometimes he would leave it in the back of the graveyard at the original Poe grave. I think it all depended upon how many people were standing outside the gates. So in the meantime, while this was going on, we looked for suspects who might be doing this in the Baltimore area. And we came up with 3 people. I'm not going to mention their names because they are deceased, but they did fit the profile of the Poe toaster in size and why they might be doing it. They were very big Poe fans, and they fit the age group. But slowly, each one of these suspects passed away, and the tribute did continue. Then one year, well, we actually started doing our own public Poe birthday celebration, and at that time, we usually ended the celebration near midnight, where we had our own toast to Poe at the Poe monument. So, following year, the person showed up, and not only did he leave 3 red roses and a bottle of French cognac, but he left a note saying that some tradition must pass while others continue. The torch will be passed. Now, I didn't know what this meant. It was kind of cryptic. So, you know, it's like the torch will be passed. Did that mean that someone else is doing the tribute? Or did he mean that by being in the audience watching what we were doing honoring Poe, that maybe he thought he didn't have to do this anymore? Maybe he was getting too old to be traipsing through old graveyards in the middle of the night. Maybe his health wasn't good, and he saw what we were doing. So maybe he meant that the torch would be passed to us. The fact that we were paying respects to Poe, but we didn't know. We had to wait for 1 year. So the following year, a week before January 19th, Baltimore was hit by a blizzard. There was ice and snow all over the place. The graveyard, the tombstones were covered with snow, and it was really treacherous. So somehow I made it into the city with a few other people. Now this time we were not in the catacombs because it was so cold. We were upstairs in the church looking through the windows like the one right here. So we were warm. We had hiding under the cover of darkness, but we had a clear view of the sidewalk. So we saw a man, it was around 3 o'clock in the morning, walking down the street very slowly because it was spots that were still covered with snow and ice. Dressed in black, white scarf, and black hat. But this guy was a lot bigger than the guy that we've seen in previous years. So he came into the graveyard, and what normally took just a few minutes for the tribute took about 20 minutes because he went to the back of the graveyard, walking very slowly, and a few times he would slip. And I thought, oh my goodness, suppose he falls. Do we run out and help him? And if we do that, then we will know who's doing it. So fortunately, he didn't fall. He placed the tribute and he left. So since that time, we saw 2 different Poe toasters alternating. Then one year, we found another note with the tribute. This one was a little bit touching. It was addressed to me. It said, "Dear Jeff, we regret to inform you that our father has passed away, and he wanted us to tell you how much he appreciated the fact that we never interfered with him, we never tried to take his photograph, and we prevented other people from trying to interfere with his tribute." They said it meant a lot to him that we respected Poe and that we were doing our own tribute to Poe. Well, when I read that, I started getting a little choked up because we finally knew that it was a father and son's tradition. So subsequent to that, the tribute continued, and again, alternating between the larger son and a much smaller son. After a while, they started dressing for the weather. In other words, they gave up the black outfit and the white scarf and the black hat, and they dressed more or less for very cold weather. So, along comes 2009, the Poe Bicentennial, and it was a no-show. Nobody showed up. So I'm thinking maybe where they were coming from, it was snowing or it was ice, or maybe they were sick. For some reason, they couldn't make it. So I thought, well, we'll see what happens next year. Well, 2011, no show, didn't show up again. So now I'm beginning to get a little concerned, thinking that maybe this tribute is over with. So I thought, we'll give it one more year, and if they don't show up, I think we can safely assume the tribute is over with. So no show in 2010, no show 2011. Here comes 2013, and nobody showed up. So at that point, I declared that the tribute was obviously over with. And people were really upset because this tribute got international publicity. Now, I'll give you an example of how far this tribute went. In 1985, when I was at the Poe House as curator, I received a phone call from the Baltimore Civic Center. This Russian circus was in town, and he wanted to know if he could bring a few Russians to the Poe House. Well, this was in January, and I thought, sure, no problem. 1 o'clock. My first mistake was not trying to get him to specify how many people a few meant. So 1 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door, and I saw this sea of fur. It must have been about 25, 30 people, fur coats, fur hats, and these were the acrobats, the lion tamers, the clowns, the ballerinas, and all the people that made the Russian circus work, and they were all wearing fur coats, real fur coats. So I thought, how am I going to do this? So I brought them into the house, gave them a tour. They were all smiles, and some of them understood English, and others were listening to the interpreter. And just before they left, I told them about the story of the Poe toaster and how the person would leave 3 red roses and a half-filled bottle of French cognac. And the minute I said that, they went from smiles to frowning, looking at each other, very angry. And I thought, what did I say? So I turned to the interpreter and I said, did I say something the wrong way? And she said, no, I understood what you were saying. Maybe you should say it again. So I said, 3 red roses and a half-filled bottle of French cognac. No! This guy raised his fist and he said, Pravda, say vodka! I'm going, what's going on? And again, this is happening in seconds. And he said it again. Pravda, say vodka! And it occurred to me that the communist newspaper Pravda copied the Associated Press story word for word, with the exception that they changed the liquor from French cognac to Russian vodka. So that way people in Russia could identify with this tribute. So here I am with 20, 25, 30 Russians staring at me, waiting for a response. So I had 2 choices. One, I could say the heck with Pravda, I'm sticking to the truth, it was French cognac, or do I avoid an international incident at the Poe House and agree that it was Russian vodka? What do you think I did? Well, I caved. I didn't want an incident at the Poe House, and it was so stupid and so silly because I just said French cognac, so I said, what am I thinking of? Of course, 3 red roses and a very expensive bottle of Russian vodka. Well, they were all smiling. Oh, yes, you one of us, you brother, yes, yes. And they're all giving me tickets to the Russian circus. So I avoided an international incident. But the point is that this story went around the world. In Japan, the person left sake. In France, that was the only country that didn't change the liquor because it was expensive French cognac. But that's just an illustration of how far this story went. And usually I would get voicemails or letters in the mail asking me, did he show up? And these were from Australia, South America, countries in Europe. Everyone wanted to know if the guy showed up. And I couldn't imagine why it was so popular. And then it dawned on me that this tribute was honest. It was a very touching tribute that whoever started this, maybe they suffered some way like Poe. Maybe they were a struggling writer like Poe. And this was their way of paying tribute to Poe. Now, the 3 roses, that's easy. There are 3 bodies underneath that monument to my left. Edgar, his Aunt Maria Clem, and his wife Virginia. So 1 rose for each person. Why cognac? Well, Poe didn't drink it. He didn't write about it. But cognac is something that you would drink if you were toasting someone. So I suspect that it was just a favorite label of the original Poe toaster. So I declared the tribute over with, and for several years it was all quiet. Then in 2016, the Maryland Historical Society decided to resurrect this tribute. And they wanted to hold a judging. They invited people from around the country to be the next Poe toaster. Well, when I heard this, I thought, oh no, you know, the tribute is dead, don't do this. And they asked me to be one of the judges. So I had a decision to make. Do I say, no, I don't want any part of this, and let them go in whatever direction they're going in? Or do I be part of this and try to keep them focused with what they were doing? And I decided to participate. And after talking to them more, it appeared to me that they really were serious about this. They didn't want to turn it into a circus, and their intent was to find a new Poe toaster, and that this person would come not in the middle of the night, but during the late afternoon, early evening, and the public was invited to watch. Now, when I told people about this, they were saying, Jeff, you sold out, this is awful, you know, don't do it. But like I said, if I didn't have any participation, I would have no say in what they were doing. So we held the auditions. There were maybe 15 or 20 people that came from around the country. We had people from Florida, New York State, the Midwest, California, and they all had their own interpretation of what they saw the new Poe toaster to be. We encourage them to include music or dance or any other medium to enhance the visit. So some of them were actually no imagination. Others were quite good. And we chose this one person. He came up to a fake stone on stage at the university, at the Maryland Historical Society, and he included music with his tribute, a violin. And that really impressed me. And then he did a tribute to Poe in Latin. So he was the winner. So the first time he showed up, and again, this was open to the public, we had about 150 people standing outside surrounding the Poe monument, waiting for him to show up. So at the appointed time, we heard violin music in the background. And then he started walking up the pathway to the Poe monument. And I'm looking at the audience, and we had children in the audience, and their eyes were wide open. And I saw this one little girl, she was possibly 8 or 9 years old, holding her father's arm. And once she saw him, the expression on her face, she was bright. It was like, and she started pulling on her daddy's arm, going, "Daddy, Daddy, there he is. Look, look, there he is." The minute I saw that, I knew I made the right decision in being part of this new Poe toaster. And the audience was so quiet. He played the violin, he spoke in Latin, and then as he walked away, he played the violin, and you could have heard a pin drop. And I looked at the audience again, and there were people like, and they couldn't believe that they actually saw this. So he has continued with this tribute, and again, we don't reveal his identity. We don't need to know that. What's important is that the tradition continued, and the audience loved it. And since then, I've received no complaints from anyone saying, this is awful. And I had several people in the audience contact me and said initially that they didn't think this was a good idea, but they saw how reserved it was and how we treated it seriously. So, following this segment, you will see the Poe toaster who appeared at the Poe grave this past January 19th. So I do encourage you to hang around, but I just wanted to give you a brief background on the history of the Poe toaster. And it never was a joke, it never was a hoax, it was the real thing. So whoever it was that started it, I thank them, and I appreciate their tribute to Poe at doing it all these years since 1949, and without any fanfare. And I also appreciate the fact that he knew that we were not going to interfere or interrupt. And apparently he was okay with the tribute. And he was very thankful that we did our public tribute. So in a thumbnail sketch, that's the history of the Poe toaster. Now I've heard people say, oh, it happened in the 1930s. Well, we don't know that. Anything's possible. I went by the 1950 article where the pastor of the church, who would know these things, and it sounded like it was recent. He didn't say, oh, for 10 years, 20 years, this guy's been doing this. He knew about it. So I'm assuming that 1949, which was the anniversary of the death of Poe, 1949, is when it started. But we'll never really know. So I want to thank you for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, we're not over yet. And remember, at 5 p.m., we will be outside at the Poe Monument live through this page, Edgar Allan Poe Evermore, with a public toast to Poe. So we hope to see you at 4 o'clock for the Poe Toaster segment and at 5 o'clock for the live broadcast from the Poe Monument. And remember, tell us who you are and post where you are from. So thank you, and we'll see you live among the dead here at the Westminster Graveyard at the Poe Monument. Thank you.